it's really foundational as a product. I think that, I always say the most valuable asset anyone has is themselves and ability to generate an income. And if you can't generate that income due to accident, sickness, health, why wouldn't you insure that? Why wouldn't you insure that? But maybe people with mobile phones are more important to them.
Hi, I'm Amy Austin, News Editor at FT Advisor. Thank you for joining me for this fireside chat with Rose St. Louis, where we will chat about how we can encourage more people to think about protection and how we can get women into the financial services. Thank you for joining me today, Rose. It's lovely to have you.
And thank you for having me.
So it is quite difficult to get people to think about income protection in particular. There are figures out there that says only 14% of us in the UK actually have it. So how can we, get more people taking out this product? And why is it that people don't think about protection when it is just so important to have?
It's such an interesting point and important because, when I started off in the industry as a financial advisor, protection was always the cornerstone of good financial planning. You look at asset creation and asset preservation and protection falls in that asset preservation. We're not just talking about things, we're talking about people, okay? Yeah. But the truth of the matter is no one leaps out of bed in the morning and says, I'm going to get £100,000 worth of life cover today and maybe some critical illness. And while I'm at it, let's get some income protection. It just doesn't happen. It's something that people say, yes, I need to do, and there are reasons why they keep putting it off. Typical life stage points are a really good inflection point where you can think about protection, like getting a house, buying a mortgage, getting married, having children. But again, it's staggering the amount of people that, married with children in their family home and their mortgage is unprotected. So if something happens to them, they're really, really exposed, and the risk of their families not being able to stay in the home that they wanted to is problematic.
Do you think it is just, us as humans being like, you see, illnesses happen, you see accidents happen, you think, this won't happen to me and my family, we're fine. Do you think it is an element of that, or do you think it is more like the money side of things where people think, I don't want to pay for that every month?
It's probably a combination. There's nothing sexy about protection really, is there? But, it's really, really important. If you ask people, do you think you should have it, for all the reasons they know, they'll probably say yes. No one can escape the stat that 1 in 2 people will be diagnosed with cancer before they hit retirement age. Everyone knows someone that's got cancer. It's the biggest reason we pay out critical illness claims, yet still the motivation for people to do that, and to actually get it. Like after hearing this conversation, they'll think, yes, I probably should. And then that just fails away and just falls away because other things become more and more important, and it just needs to be prioritised. And this is where the value of advisors really, really come in.
Yeah, and is it a bigger gap with women, do you find? Because obviously, we have a gender pay gap that does exist. Is that also contributing to, there being a bigger protection gap in terms of women? Do they think, well, my husband will get protection and not really think about themselves? So yes, you're absolutely right. Unsurprisingly, there is a gap, a gender protection gap as well. Typically, women have less. Their sum assured is lower than men. They allocate a lesser premium towards protecting themselves, their health, and their lives. But what's interesting is I always describe women as lionesses and like protectorates. They're the primary carers, whether they're in full-time work or their full-time work is looking after the family. So they're the people that are typically going to motivate their partner to buy protection, or they're the people who will stretch their income to try and do those things for the family as well as themselves. So, and the really interesting thing, we did some research at Scottish Widows, and what we realised is it's not just the protection that's important to the women, but it's also the value-added services like the virtual GP, and the usage by women and children is higher. So, trying to get a GP appointment, women will use that, and for their children. So the usage is more. So they really, really value that, as well as the core protection product as well. Yeah. And well, speaking about women, tell us how you kind of got into financial services as like a woman yourself.
So I started off as a financial advisor the first 10 years of my career, which was a long time ago. That's when I went on a course for a week, and by the end of the week I've got my financial planning certificate part 1, and I was allowed to give advice. And then it was holistic advice, truly, because there wasn't as much regulation. So the compartmentalisation of advice that we see today, you didn't really have a protection specialist or a mortgage specialist or a pension specialist specialist. So, I could be selling a mortgage with an endowment or life cover. It was PEPs at that point rather than ISAs. It was the tech boom, so I was selling EPPs and contracting people out of SERPs. That gives you a bit of an idea how old I am. But, I started off and did 10 years as an advisor, working in bank assurance, large nationals, smaller IFAs. So I did a whole bunch of stuff, and I think I'm really grateful that I spent that time in the industry as an advisor, because that's where I really, really learned about the value of the relationship between the advisor and the client at that point in time, the trust that exists, and also that when you make a recommendation to a provider, as an advisor, you're outsourcing your reputational risk to that provider. And I think now, working on the other side as a provider, that cannot be taken for granted. So yeah, I did that. Along the way, I've worked in investments as well, outsourced investment processing, outsourced investment management. I've worked as a consultant in one of the big four, and then parachuted back into corporate world, working now at Scottish Widows within Lloyds Banking Group, running the protection business.
And why protection? Why did you kind of stick with protection? Was it?
It's interesting because before I got back into protection, I was really in investment platforms and investment world, but the opportunity arose for me to run a business, and it was the protection business that came through. And I had been working in distribution multi-propositionally, so platforms, investments and protection. This opportunity came up, and I'd never run an end-to-end business before, so that's where I kind of learned how to do that, and it happened to be in the protection business, which I love. Found it really purposeful and very inclusive. It's not a high net worth proposition, it's a pretty inclusive proposition.
Yeah, I think that with protection, people kind of forget about it sometimes, or especially like with advisors, maybe see it as, just like an add-on. But yeah, I think protection is always so interesting, and, need more people shouting about it. So it's great.
Core. It's really foundational as a product. I think that, I always say the most valuable asset anyone has is themselves and ability to generate an income. And if you can't generate that income due to accident, sickness, health, why wouldn't you insure that?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you insure that?
Yeah.
But maybe people with mobile phones are more important to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's naughty.
And what would you like to see kind of change so that we can get, more women into financial services?
I mean, there are so many things, right? We talk about education, we talk about, nudges pushing, marketing and all that kind of good stuff. But I think as an industry, what I would really, really love to see is more male allies, prominent male allies. I would love to see senior male leaders advocating for gender equality or to get more women into the industry, which I guess I could be a bit provocative now and say, I would love you and your colleagues within the trade and industry press, when we interview men about their businesses, we ask them some D&I questions. You can hear like PR teams across the country going crazy with that, can't you? But let's ask them, right? And if you think about in football, you've got Gary Lineker, you've got Ian Wright, you've got David Beckham really advocating for women's football, irrespective of the consequences, because they believe it's right and they think that the female game is just as important as the men's. Where are those people in financial services? Where are our Gary Linekers? Now, I'm going to say, I think that they exist. I think that they genuinely exist, and most people will hear their leaders, male and otherwise, advocate for equality, gender equality, D&I across the piece within their organisations. But I think it'd be really helpful as an industry to give men, allow oxygen to that conversation for men so they can show themselves to us. And I think the needle will start to move and people might sit up and take a little bit more notice.
Yeah, well, thank you, Rose. Well, you've given me something to do now. Watch out, men. Every time you come in, get interviewed by me, there's a D&I question coming right at you. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Here's a quick reminder of our weekly interview series, 51 for 51, where we speak to women across financial services in the run-up to International Women's Day. For more videos, interviews, podcasts, features, and all of the latest news, visit ftadvisor.com. See you soon.